Buenos dias.
Hello, good morning.
I am delighted to be here at this wonderful Congress. And I'm especially happy to have met so many amazing young people this week and traveled a little bit in this beautiful country. So, to begin my talk, my title is about really how I have had this journey in my life of studying both Buddhism, mostly as a scholar, but also as a practitioner, and also science. And these two paths were continuous for more than 40 years for me. So I've been combining these two for a long time. And it's good to also, I think, reflect on, with some gratitude, the people that helped us to be where we are now. So I will not go through all of these people, except to say that Anne Treisman was my PhD advisor, and her husband, Danny Kahneman, was a great influence as well. I will speak a little bit more about Eleanor Roche, and then Ken Peller, who was a speaker earlier this week, is mi marido, my husband, and also a very important collaborator in science. So one person I did want to point out is this connection that I have with Chile and with science in Chile. And the most important person for this connection for me is Francisco Varela, who of course was a student of Humberto Maturana. And Francisco Varela worked with Eleanor Roche. They wrote a book together, and she was one of my mentors and professors when I was in school. And Francisco Varela also was the co-founder of the Mind and Life Institute. So this is a very important organization that began dialogues with the Dalai Lama in 1987, and I was a new student with Eleanor Roche at that time. And these dialogues have continued, and there also are research grants, Varela Awards, for students who are pursuing this kind of research. So this connection is profound for me and really very deep. Now to really what I'm going to talk about today. And my intentions for my talk have changed a little bit over the week as I've heard other speakers and meeting organizers and some of the politicians talking about the dangers of things like AI and lots of online material and the way that we engage with and consume this. We should also understand that those who are creating this material for us are very interested in our increasing and continuing consumption of this material. So things are designed to capture your attention, and they're designed to hold your attention. This is the whole point of it. And many of you may have played an online game or something like that and realized at some point that you're playing the game, but you're really not enjoying it very much. And you go, like, why am I doing this? And it's partly because the game is designed to keep you going. You know, you get a little bit better, it gets a little bit more challenging, and it keeps you stepping in it. And then, you know, you kind of rise back to the surface and realize that you've spent maybe hours on these games. And often we don't feel very good at the end of it. So this is just an example of the many distractions. I particularly like the slide, which in English says, weapons of mass distraction. So these are ways in which we have all of these pulls on our attention. Even when you're driving, moving signs, lots of things flashing, so your attention is being yanked around, and often we feel like it's not really under our control. So we have a little bit reduced ability to make choices in that circumstance. And we often don't realize that we're distracted at the beginning. So we might be really used to checking our phone. If you feel boredom, one of the things I've noticed in the time, about 30 years that I've been teaching about things like this, is decreasing tolerance for boredom among people. So even if for just a minute we are distracted or bored by something, we pull out our phone right away, you know. Waiting for something, you pull out your phone. Someone is 2 minutes late, you have to be on your phone. So we're not tolerant to actually be present. We mind wander too, and we often have these habitual actions which are really kind of interesting and important. So Daniel Kahneman, who I mentioned at the beginning, wrote a book later in his career called Thinking Fast and Slow. And of course, he was an important influence for me intellectually as well. The thinking fast that he talks about is a mode of being that we have where we rely on habits, we rely on automatic behaviors, where we don't think too much, we just, there's stimulus and then response. And this is happening over and over again. I think this is a big problem for many media sources, because when do you most use media? When you're bored, when you're tired, when you want to relax. And in that mode, we don't do the activities of the thinking slow part. So the thinking slow is when we take time to question, to look carefully at things, and maybe also to reject and say, no, this is not what I want to do right now. No, I don't believe this. No, I think maybe this is misinformation. So being aware of these two modes can actually help us to notice when we're in this kind of mindless consumption mode, and then maybe when we notice, you put the brake on a little bit, back out a little, say, oh, is this really what I want to be doing right now? Or am I being misinformed and manipulated by someone else? So the scope of this talk is really about taking our attention back so that we're the ones that are controlling it, not others. Okay, so I also will be talking about mindfulness. It's in my title here, and many of you will be familiar with mindfulness. This is an idea that comes from Asian wisdom traditions, so it's often associated with Buddhism, but it actually predates Buddhism by several thousand years. So a guess is that people have been doing these kind of mindfulness practices for around 5,000 years. They're very, very ancient techniques for training our minds. And you might have this idea that, oh, in mindfulness, we must be aware of present moment, what exactly is happening, often our sensory experiences. But as we go to talk about this some more, let's just briefly look at the definition. So this is the most popular definition for mindfulness that's used, especially in America, but other places as well, is that it's an awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose. This is the important part. This is voluntary attention in a non-judgmental way. So this is just accepting your experience for what it is in the moment. And this is a perfectly fine thing. Usually breath is the way attention is directed. And we know that mindfulness practices are beneficial for all sorts of things. They help with anxiety and depression. These are often many experimental studies. In fact, in the US, the Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine at the National Institutes of Health will not fund any studies on meditation or mindfulness, not because they're prejudiced against them, but because these are considered demonstratedly effective practices. So we know that they work already. They don't need to be in the complementary or alternative category. So many demonstrations for all sorts of things. Stress, lots of mental health things, sleep problems, chronic pain is an interesting one. So people learn basically to live with chronic pain and manage it a little bit better. So when I'm talking about a mindfulness exercise, it's really a simple but very difficult thing at the same time. So we sit quietly. This is, I think, very important because when we're sitting quietly, we're doing as little as possible. And when we're doing very little, then we have time to actually watch what our minds are doing, notice how this is happening, and as we watch what our minds are doing, we can see how they're being pushed and pulled. And we also have this very effective training, which, like any habit, takes time, is when we notice we're distracted, we simply let go of the distraction, and we bring our mind back to the breath or whatever else we're concentrating on, and we stay there for a moment, and when we're distracted, we come back again. So this letting go and coming back is really the core of this practice. I mentioned here that mindfulness can change some interpersonal behaviors as well. And this is, you can try this experiment. Try when you talk to the next person you speak with, try focusing 100% on that conversation. Not at what time it is, what I need to do next, that text notification that I just got. Just pay attention to the other person and just experiment with this and see what the quality of your experience is from this. And here's an example. I'm not going to show very much data here, but this is a small study where they took a group of people and they had them either draw for 5 minutes or listen to a 5-minute guided meditation. So you're not having to figure out what to do yourself, someone else is telling you. And all of these participants were paid for being in the experiment. And then after the experiment, they were asked, how much of the money we just gave you would you like to give to charity? And remarkably, this very short intervention changes how much money people are willing to donate, especially for people who are younger and also for people with less education. So these are not exclusive categories. Sometimes people are both younger and have less money. So short interventions can actually work remarkably well. But mindfulness is not the whole story. You might think that just sitting and being aware of your breath all the time, how can you get anything done? And what else? How can we move kind of beyond this? And within the Buddhist tradition, this is a very small part of what the entire package of things is. It's quite useful, but it's small. So how can we learn to function better in the world? Well, I think we can train our attention. And some of the practices for training attention come from these traditions. So for the next few minutes, we're going to look at some experimental paradigms that are used to investigate attention, and I will give you a kind of first-hand experience of this. So the first thing that we're going to look at is something that's called change blindness. When we don't see motion that signals change in the world, it's very, very difficult to find sometimes. So what I want you to do is you'll see two pictures that are rapidly switching back and forth. And what I want you to do is to raise your arm when you see what is changing between the two pictures. Okay, are you ready? Now you notice some people have seen it already. Would you like a hint? It's an important part of an airplane. Oh, thank you. Okay, so you see what I'm talking about here. This is a surprisingly strong effect, and it can take a very long time. If it took you a long time or you never saw the change, that's okay, because there's a little bit of chance involved in this. For instance, if you happen to be looking at exactly the right place when the slides start changing, you'll notice the difference. But as soon as we start to systematically search through, it's very difficult. And the trick here is there's a blank screen in between the pictures, so you don't see any little change locally in motion, and so your attention is not drawn to this. So another example of a test, and this is one that's been used with meditators, is something called the attentional blink. And in this demonstration, you'll see a set of numbers. They'll flash by very quickly. A set of numbers, and then within that set of numbers, there are 2 letters. And so your task is to see the letters and remember them. So 2 of them, all right? Ready? Anyone want to see it again? Okay, so if you saw A and J, you were correct. If you saw A on one time and J on the other one, then you didn't succeed, because these are separate. There's something about when we engage our attention, it takes a little time to release that attention and be prepared for something else. And so this is something that's measured with tasks like this, varying the number of intervening elements and many things like this. So this is a study that has probably 1,000 publications using variations of this paradigm. But this is something that was studied in something called the Shamatha Project, which was where Cliff Saran had people meditate for 3 months on focused attention, and as a consequence of this, they became more efficient at the task. So here's another example of something called motion-induced blindness. So if you hold your eyes at the center where the light, the little green dot is flashing, and just watch this and see whether these bright yellow dots disappear, or are they continuously visible? Anyone seeing dots disappear? Oh, good, all the way through the audience. This is really curious because the dots never change. The dots are always there. This rotating blue background is always there. And this is something that is affected by our ability to actually direct attention to that little green dot, that fixation point. And these are some data from an interesting paper in 2005 where novice meditators were compared to more experienced meditators. And the experienced meditators, some of them were able to, once the dots disappeared, they stayed away for a really long time, as long as 12 minutes for the most experienced person. And I can't do anything close to that when I try to do this task. Sometimes they all disappear for a moment, and then some of them come back. And so voluntary attention is what we're training here so that we can actually control our behavior. We gain resistance to distraction by training attention. This gives us attention that's more stable. We can choose how long we want to attend to something, so this is a sustained attention. We notice when we're distracted instead of missing it, and this is a vigilance component, so it's like, oh, yes, I'm not doing what I intended to do, let go and come back. And it also allows us to be more sensitive to our mental activity. This gives us more control, and then we can make better choices. So in conclusion, in a time where we face really intense competition for our attentional resources, we can actively train our attention, improve the skills, and become aware of what we're actually consuming. And especially, I'm speaking to the younger people in the audience, I think it's very important that we control what we consume, we control the choices that we make, and we control what we take into our minds. So thank you for your attention.